morning. So I'm going to try something a little new. I'm trying to use a laptop instead of wasting paper, and I'm going to try sitting down today. So if I stand up or do weird stuff, just bear with me. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to say welcome to everyone here today, as everyone joining us online. I'd like to congratulate everyone here today because today is the unofficial holiday of oops, I woke up too late, and I'll just watch church online today. So today we're also going to try something a little new, maybe a little odd. And for this to work, I'm going to need your help. So this is going to be a group participation kind of sharing thing. So what we're going to do, in the interest of losing an hour's sleep, we're going to learn the lesson of the day first, and then just repeat it throughout today's sharing time. So we're going to repeat it throughout the sharing time, and I'm going to do this kind of like in the fitness coaching call style. So in the fitness world, sometimes we do a thing called coach's call. So what we do is like the coach will say like, okay, run, and then the coach will call something, and then you'll do something else, like do a burpee. I'm not going to do a burpee because I don't want to lose everything here. Or you'll do a different exercise, and then the coach will do a different call, then you might have to do a squat. So I'm not going to make you do that. Instead, we're going to repeat the lesson of the day. So, and the lesson is this. I don't know what to do. I'm going to follow Jesus. So if everyone can repeat that. Beautiful. Okay. So let's get back to the topic. So last week, Chad introduced us to Ecclesiastes, and he gave us the background to the author, King Solomon, who was David's son. And that set the stage that this can be a pretty depressing book. So, but in another lens, it can also ground us to realize what is important. And now I'm going to cover the back half of chapter 1 of Ecclesiastes. It talks about wisdom and knowledge. But before we get to today's reading, let's explore some other places in the Bible where we talk about this. But before we even do that, let's do a quick prayer. And this is for me, really, because I just need to ground myself. So anyways, Holy Father, let today's word be one of encouragement. Bless everyone here and bless everyone online, and let them hear what they need to hear. Give them a blessing of hope, a blessing of encouragement, a blessing of realization that in times of uncertainty, we can just fix our eyes on your Son, Jesus. In any confusion, we can tune everything out, look to him, and to follow him. And he will lead us directly into your presence where we long to be forever. We thank you for sending your Son, Jesus, because he saves us from all this meaninglessness. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay. So, back to hunting for wisdom. So, first I did a search pretty simplistically throughout the Bible for where we covered wisdom. And I didn't do the synonyms because if I did everything about wisdom, we'd be here till Easter. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover Proverbs first, and it mentions wisdom a whole lot. And I'm going to kind of talk fast because I got a lot of material. So first we're going to see Proverbs 2. And there we go. I was pointing in the wrong direction there. So Proverbs 2, wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong, and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and whose are devious in their ways. And then in Proverbs 3, and there's going to be a whole bunch of Proverbs slides, so bear with me. Proverbs 3, blessed are those who find wisdom and who gain understanding, for she is more profitable than silver and yields better returns than gold. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you can desire can compare with her. So far, wisdom good. Get it. Proverbs 4, get wisdom, get understanding. Do not forget my words or turn away from them. Do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this. Get wisdom. I find that kind of funny. The beginning of wisdom is to get wisdom. It's kind of like a little circular reasoning there. But though it costs you all you have, get understanding. And then in Proverbs 10, we have the wise store up knowledge, but the mouth of the fool invites ruin. That was a lot. Okay, everyone? Beautiful. Okay, let's keep going through Proverbs, more Proverbs. The discerning heart seeks knowledge, but the mouth of a fool feeds on folly. Proverbs 16. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight rather than silver. So what we're seeing is get wisdom, wisdom awesome, get wisdom, keep on getting wisdom. And we're almost through Proverbs, but Proverbs talks about wisdom a lot. Gold is there and rubies are in abundance, but lips that speak knowledge are a rare jewel. By wisdom, a house is built, and through understanding, it is established. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled and rare and beautiful treasures. So as we see, lots and lots of slides from Proverbs. Proverbs has the most references for wisdom. There's more outside of Proverbs, and we're going to hit those next. But so far, what Proverbs is telling us, get wisdom, wisdom good, get it. So next, let's take a look at 1 Kings 3. So in this text, what we have is King Solomon, who's David's son, and Chad talked a little bit about this last week. King Solomon is at the very beginning of his rule as king. And during a dream, the Lord appeared to Solomon, and the Lord said he'd grant what Solomon would ask for. So here's Solomon's response. Now, Lord my God, you have made your servant king in place of my father David. But I am only a little child and do not know how to carry out my duties. Your servant here is among the people you have chosen, a great people, too numerous to count or number. So give your servant a discerning heart and govern your people to distinguish between right and wrong. For who is able to govern this great people of yours? So just a quick little bonus nugget here. So what you're going to see, what I kind of found really cool was, where is the, there we go. So we say, discerning heart to govern your people between right and wrong. So Solomon is asking, I want to know what's right and wrong. Or maybe synonyms are good and bad. Or maybe I want to ask for the tree of knowledge. So it's kind of like an inverse of the test back in Genesis 3 when Eve failed that test by the crafty serpent. So if you want to look at more of that later, feel free, but just a free side thing. I can't go on that too far, otherwise we'll be here till Easter. So, but notice Solomon didn't ask directly for wisdom. Do we see wisdom here? Nope. He wants a discerning heart. So let's pause for a moment and get some terminology working here. So what we have is knowledge is facts. Wisdom is how to apply those facts. And then the discerning heart is applying that wisdom compassionately. So let's hit this a little more. So knowledge is knowing what to say. Wisdom is knowing when to say it. Or more popularly, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. So what's interesting here is Solomon was asking for a discerning heart. And in my opinion, he's asking for wisdom, and as a side effect, he's also getting knowledge. It's kind of like the trifecta of things in one request. Kind of like it was almost a cheat code when like a genie gives you like those magic 3 wishes, and one wish you got 3 things. So it's kind of cool. So let's also look at the difference between wisdom and a discerning heart. A discerning heart is going to apply wisdom in a godly way. Wisdom can also be misused. You actually see a lot of examples of Solomon later not using his wisdom properly. But also in its negative connotation, wisdom can also be thought of as crafty. And I bring that up because we need to be wise to also identify that craftiness. So what I mentioned before is that first test of by Eve in the garden in Genesis 3 was by the wise and crafty serpent. So it's a test that she and Adam failed because they took from the knowledge of good and evil. And that was due to the craftiness or wise serpent. So you can be wise, but not use it in the proper manner. So that leads me back to the discerning heart. And a side lesson for the day is, Lord, give me a discerning heart so I can apply justice and mercy in a wise way according to your will. Coach's call. Excellent. So, interesting enough, later in Ecclesiastes, we actually have 2 more references to wisdom. And they're as follows. So, in chapter 7, wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing. Wisdom, like an inheritance, is a good thing and benefits for those who see the sun. Wisdom is a shelter as money is a shelter. But the advantage of knowledge is this: wisdom preserves those who have it. And then Ecclesiastes 9, wisdom is better than weapons of war, but one sinner destroys much good. So what we're seeing is, in Ecclesiastes, yes, wisdom is good. And then to round this out, there's 4 similar quotes in the Old Testament, and we're going to look at all 4 of these together because they kind of all say the same thing. So that's why I grouped them together. So sadly enough, going back to Proverbs, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For through wisdom, your days will be many, and years will be added to your life. If you are wise, your wisdom will reward you. If you are a mocker, you will suffer alone. You alone will suffer. And then Proverbs 15, wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. And then finally, hey, we're actually not in Proverbs anymore. We finally made it to Job. And he said to the human race, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to shun evil is understanding. So, and there's one more, sorry. Psalms. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. All who follow his precepts have a good understanding. To him belongs eternal praise. So, we're going to do a sidetrack now, and we're going to refine, what do we mean by fear in fear of the Lord? Is it to be scared? Yeah, sort of, but not really. So what we mean by fear is more like a healthy reverence of God, acknowledging the incalculable power of God, acknowledging the incalculable wisdom of God, acknowledging the incalculable presence of God. So this is going to be a fun one. So what we sometimes need to think of and treat God is kind of like a nuclear reactor, or maybe an electrical substation, or maybe a house fire. So things that are awesome and dangerous. And in all those cases, how do you approach each? Do you get close to a nuclear reactor in street clothes? Or do you notice that in an electrical substation, it's surrounded by fences to keep you out? Or if there's a burning building, do you normally run in? Now, I say normally because there's situations where you're going to run into a burning building, but those who do it are protected. They put it in special gear. Otherwise, horrible consequences. So in each of those situations above, you need an appropriate set of gear. That gear, you need to be sure to what to wear, as well as your teammates need to be following appropriate protocols too, that everyone needs to go with caution because you're moving towards something with intense power. A wrong move can trigger an accident or something, or even more dangerous like death. Now, with that little analogy in mind, so are nuclear reactors bad? No, they just are. House fires, well, they're kind of bad. Electrical substations, they're not bad, they're good. But we have to be very, very careful with them. So with that analogy in mind, that's kind of how we look at God in the Old Testament lens, or that was a common view in the Old Testament. So when we see Leviticus and Numbers, there's a whole bunch of laws back then, and those rules were primarily geared towards the priest, but for everyone too. But they were there for their protection. Remember, God is holy, and sin and uncleanliness cannot exist in his presence. So the rules of the curtains, the clothes, the washing, certain foods were all about getting uncleanliness away from us and into holiness so we could be with God and not die in the process. So the reason I say that is, so when you have God as ultimate holiness, sin, uncleanliness, if it's just in the presence, poof, goes away. It cannot exist. So if we're carrying that along with us, well, guess what? We also, bad things happen to us too. That's the rule. That's kind of the rules of holiness. So an example back in the Bible is when they were transferring the Ark of the Covenant, the presence of God, there were very strict guidelines of how did you move that ark back and forth. And the rules were you had to have some poles, and the ark was carried on those poles, and then people carried them. That was the rules in place. Instead, what happened in one of the stories was the Ark of the Covenant was put on a cart, and then the cart was carried by an ox, and as that cart was going along one time, the cart started to tip. When it tipped, one of the guys tried to steady the cart, touch the ark, and was immediately killed. Did he do anything wrong? Well, he was trying to do the right thing, but it was the side effect of he wasn't in full holiness and cleanliness, and he touched the ark in the presence of God. Boom, dead. So it was the equivalent of sticking your hand in the electrical socket accidentally. So yes, we need to be fearful of God, but it's fearful in realizing the raw power he possesses. That was a lot. So, and that can be kind of sad, but I want to emphasize this is also an Old Testament view, and Jesus was not on the scene yet. Jesus makes our access to God so much simpler. All of the steps we see in Leviticus is a preparation to make us holy because God is holy. And we need to be holy to be in God's presence because, like I said before, uncleanliness and sin cannot exist in God's presence. Because of our desire to be with God, any sin and uncleanliness we bring along for the ride could destroy us. So yeah, we should be fearful. And we need to keep track of how to get holy to be in his presence. So many of those priestly laws, like I said before, are ways to, for lack of a better term, it's in the olden days a material and safety data sheet of how to interact with God. So, if you didn't follow the rules correctly, death can hang in the balance. Now, with that in mind, we don't need to worry about uncleanliness and sin. We have Jesus. Jesus makes us holy. We can now approach God with ease because we have Jesus. We are washed in Jesus' blood and made clean. So we can stand and be with God without that fear. And that is the good news of the gospel and the cross. That was a lot. So, great. Okay, because that was I needed to break things up a little bit because that was a lot of stuff, and if you were starting to take a nap, I need to bring you back. So that was a long aside. It was a lot of stuff. That was a lot to pack in. But I just want to emphasize that, yes, fear the Lord, but we need to fear him in a place of positive awe, not a negative place of being scared of God. So back in our wisdom tour again. So let's just land 2 more verses in the New Testament talking about wisdom. There's a lot more about talking about wise, saying wise and things like that, but we don't want to be here till Easter. So next up, we have James. So James says, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. So before we get to the last New Testament verse, let's summarize everything we've seen so far in our quick survey of wisdom. Wisdom good, wisdom is valuable, it's more valuable than silver. Try to get wisdom at every opportunity. Wisdom will save you from bad choices. Wisdom, good, good, good. So finally, there's one more entry in 1 Corinthians, which kind of takes a little different interpretation on wisdom. So let's hit that. Do not deceive yourselves. If any of you think you are wise by the standards of this age, you should become fools, so that you may become wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness in God's sight. As it is written, he catches the wise in their craftiness. Notice craftiness shows up again, so just a little nugget there. So here, it's saying wisdom might not be so great. Or is it? Because if I want to be wise, I should be a fool, but then to be a fool, I'd be wise. But being wise, I could be foolish in God's eyes, but then I'm a fool, but then I can become wise. And it's kind of like you get circular around there. It's an interesting conundrum. So we're just going to listen to that, absorb it maybe a little bit, and let's just park about that. Let's just put that in the parking lot for a moment, that roundabout reasoning, and let's just keep moving on, because maybe this will get clarified later. So before we get to the reading, let's still conclude getting wisdom is pretty important. So even though we had the kind of the conundrums and the opposites there, it's kind of like getting wisdom is still a good thing. So now let's get on to the reading. Ecclesiastes, and we're going to go 12 through 18. I, the teacher, was king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to study and to explore by wisdom all that is done under the heavens. What a heavy burden God has laid on mankind. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun. All of them are meaningless, a chasing after the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. And I said to myself, look, I have increased wisdom more than anyone who has ruled over Jerusalem before me. I have experienced much wisdom and knowledge. Then I applied myself to the understanding of wisdom and also of madness and folly. But I learned that this too is a chasing after the wind. For with much wisdom comes much sorrow. The more knowledge, the more grief. Wah, wah. So, that's kind of counter to everything that we've just been talking about. So I just spent the last who knows how many minutes saying getting wisdom is good and provided proof in many passages. And this passage here, kind of with 1 Corinthians, says, nope. Getting wisdom is a fool's errand. And the more you get, the sadder you're going to be. So let's combine Ecclesiastes with 1 Corinthians. And I think what we just read and notice is they seem to have a unified voice that getting wisdom is bad. And I think the Bible is now pretty clear. And wisdom is bad. So band, we can come up and we can just close in prayer now. Okay, maybe not. Okay, so what we need to do is come to terms with this wisdom. So we have countering opinions, and that's the beauty of the Bible. So we have potential contradictions, but I believe the Bible is just doing commentaries on each other. The Bible's having a dialogue or debate with itself, and these debates give us different perspectives because in our lives, we need those different perspectives. Some of these verses are going to hit at different times in our lives. So sometimes doing a quick survey, you're going to find these contradictions. But as we dig into each one, you'll get more context, and it'll provide meaning to what you need in your life at that time. So let's get back to the text, and let's just quick hit the verses point by point. And in verse 14, it said, getting wisdom can be meaningless. Verse 15 said, I'm going to skip verse 15 because it was crooked and straight, and I did some research on that, and it took me down some rabbit trails that we'd be here till Easter if we were trying to talk about that. Verses 16 and 17 were a repeat of 14, saying, getting wisdom is a fool's errand. And verse 18, actually a paraphrase of verse 18 is, ignorance is bliss. Sometimes getting more knowledge might make you more depressed. So let's camp out on that last line for a moment, though. So with that last line, I kind of see something called the Dunning-Kruger effect in that last line. So what is the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's something my oldest son loves to talk about all the time. It's a description of how much do you know about a topic versus the confidence you have in that topic. So you can kind of imagine the Dunning-Kruger effect kind of this way. So what we're going to have here is, in that bottom thing is how much competence, how confident are you in a topic versus how much do you know about it. And what happens is you might not know anything, but as you start to learn something, you get a whole bunch of confidence. And this is also sometimes called the peak amount stupid. So I think I was actually talking to Josh about this morning, and probably an easy parallel is like, let's say you learn guitar or a new instrument, and you've learned your you've learned your first 3 or 4 chords, and all of a sudden you can play all these songs. So you think, you're just on your journey, you have those first couple chords, and you think you're about to be the best thing since sliced bread in guitar playing, and then you discover excellent guitarists like Steve Vai or Stevie Ray Vaughan or those guys, and you see what those guys are doing. And then all of a sudden you realize, I know nothing about guitar. When you hit that realization, you hit the valley of despair, because now your confidence is way low, but you actually know a little more. And then eventually over time, you get more confidence and you get your confidence back. So that's kind of like how we kind of have to treat wisdom, in a sense of knowing that as I learn more, I know there's always going to be a lot more. So it's kind of being comfortable in what you don't know. And that's the essence of the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's really, how can you be comfortable in your lack of wisdom, knowing that there's always so much more out there? So let's look at, as we look at verse 18 again, what we can say is, the more I learn about something, the more I realize I know there's even more I don't know about it. Which brings us back to those 4 Old Testament verses, which can succinctly be said in Psalms 111, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Which then I'm going to rehash the fear of the Lord again. So let's take that as the fear of the Lord as realizing the magnitude of God. Imagine how much you know, and every time you double what you think you know about God, you come to realize God is so much larger, so much more complex, so much more incomprehensible, that you realize that you know even less about God because the overall picture of God is even bigger. And it's the problem of infinity. So what we're trying to do is learn about something infinitely unknowable. And then for my math nerds out there, so no matter how much we know about God, because God is infinite, what percentage of God do we know about? Well, anything is how much I know about God. God is infinite. Oops, there we go. How much do I know about God? Nothing. So I could be the most learned person here. I could be the least learned person. Same thing. We look at it mathematically, I know nothing about God. I could spend a lifetime learning about God and still have an infinitesimal fraction of understanding who God is. And maybe that's our chasing after the wind. So some might be seeing verse 18 as the pessimistic side of the realization of everything I just said. So what do we do with that? Do we not learn about God? So to rehash this, maybe the more I learn about God, the more I realize how much I don't know about God. And this brings us to the contradiction that we saw in 1 Corinthians that we noticed earlier. To be a fool is to become wise, and to be wise, I end up being a fool. Because what we learn over time is the more I know about God, the more I realize I know less about him. So what do we do with that? Do we throw our hands in the air? And this is kind of one of the struggles I've had with this week. How do I end this? Do I wallow in these sad realizations, or can I optimistically get to a solution? Or do I just invite the band up again and we just get to our post-service fellowship? Band, stay down. So I have 2 ideas here, and it's going to be kind of a choose-your-own adventure, or like on The Price is Right, Showcase Showdown. I'm going to give 2 options. If you don't like the first one, we'll go with the second one. The first one's kind of a throwaway, but I just felt like this spoke to someone. So what if we took our focus off the acquisition of wisdom and instead began to focus on the experience and joy of getting to know God? Enjoy the process. And this idea is almost in line with an idea called contemplative practices in Christianity. So contemplative practice in Christianity is basically contemplation is the way you know and think of yourself when you are sincerely praying and present, as opposed to thinking, arguing, and proving. So that was from the CAC, the Center for Contemplation. So why do I bring contemplative practices up? It's very complementary to the Mennonite state of mind, as well as our cousins, the Amish. It's contemplative practices are anti-modern, which is a nice contrast to the knowledge thinking driven world of today. So that's idea number one. So it's just a quick, maybe we should be approaching this differently, enjoy the journey. So here's idea number two. Let's be resigned in a measurable sense that we know nothing about God. And yeah, that still sounds weird to say, but it's the crazy side effect of math, because God is infinite. So let's focus again on the journey to know God. And what's the easiest way to know God? The answer is simplicity. But simplicity in a different way. What kind of simplicity? Beautiful. So now the band can actually come up as we start to close. But why Jesus? Why follow? First, we need a perspective change. We have a longing for God, and to get to know God, we need Jesus. Jesus is that bridge to getting to understand God. Not everything about God, but it makes the understanding easier. And Jesus presents it as a journey, so let's all enjoy the journey. In fact, we have this in John 14. Thomas says to him, "Lord, we don't know where you are going, so how can we know the way?" And Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life." So by following Jesus, his way, we know the way to God. We know it's a journey. We also know the more we follow Jesus, then we could be confident we are going towards the direction of God. Jesus is not going to lead you astray. So, gain wisdom like in the first half of the sharing time I had. It's okay, and it's encouraged. But we all have our limits, and when that happens, we can live just by a simple rule. And that simple rule is, I don't know what to do, I'm gonna follow Jesus.